Welcome to Geneseo Today. News and insight on issues in and around Geneseo.
Welcome to Geneseo Today, the interview show where we discuss all things Geneseo. I'm your host, Carolyn, and today I'm joined by Genesee and Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council Planner and Climate Smart Communities Coordinator, Rachel Scudder. Thank you for joining us today. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for asking. Would you please start by explaining your position?
I work, as you said, at the Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council as a planner and Climate Smart Communities Coordinator. So my position, I do, in addition to my work as with the Climate Smart Communities program, which is administered by New York State DEC, I help with comprehensive climate action planning. I also work in broadband and helping with solid waste management planning. I do a lot of different things, but my main role is with the Climate Smart Communities program.
So what parts of your background inspired you to get involved with sustainability?
I think it's something I've always been interested in. So I did my bachelor's in landscape architecture at ESF, the Environmental Science and Forestry School. I graduated with that in 2016, and there's a lot of environmental and sustainability elements in that. But I thought what I was missing personally was the human aspect of it. So I went back to school for planning, and it's just something that's very important and something that is kind of at the center of our lives right now. And it's just something that I've always kind of been passionate about, and I'm very lucky to be able to practice it in my professional life.
Sustainability is really important, both from an environmental and economic standpoint. Part of your position is being the Climate Smart Communities Coordinator. Would you please define the Climate Smart Communities initiative?
Climate Smart Communities is a New York State program that helps local governments take action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and adapt to the changing climate. The program offers grants, rebates for electric vehicles, and free technical assistance, which is what my role is.
So what do you mean by free technical assistance?
Throughout the state, there are people who are in my role. I cover 9 counties in the region, 188 municipalities. And basically, what I do is I help communities with the Climate Smart Communities application, which is multifaceted and has a lot of different entry points, but I also help with greenhouse gas inventories, climate action and adaptation plans, other technical assistance, like if a community wants a document reviewed or they're working on something, like a comprehensive plan, I'm more than willing to look at it and see if it has sustainability elements in it, things like that. I'll also help if a community has a specific project that they want implemented, whether it be a planning or infrastructure project. And so I can help them with funding. There is a Climate Smart Community grant, but there's also funding streams that are available on a state or federal level.
You did mention funding and can you walk us through how funding was specifically used in the past?
I can speak specifically about the Climate Smart Community grants. I'm not the one who applies on a municipality's behalf, but I will, I'm normally aware of the Climate Smart Community grants that have been awarded in our region. Some of them are to help with climate action planning and greenhouse gas inventories. We've seen one in the city of Batavia that was to replace their refrigeration unit in their ice hockey rink. It was kind of a new one that was available in the last couple of years. There's also helping with, infrastructure projects, to help with pedestrian improvement and bicycling improvement, things of that nature. And then there's also the zero emission vehicle program, where municipalities can apply to get funding for either an electric vehicle or charging stations. Charging stations have been very popular in this round just because I think it's something that communities are seeing a need for more and more. And so that's what I've seen on that kind of end of the spectrum as well.
Has there been anything implemented in Geneseo through this?
Not that I'm aware of. There might be, I hate to add another program into this. We do run a clean energy communities program as well, which is exactly kind of how it's stated. It helps with energy reduction, but I'm not quite sure. I personally haven't had any contact with the town or village of Geneseo, but I do talk to the county a lot, Livingston County. That's something that they've been trying to focus on.
So we've spoken a lot about the environmental sustainability efforts, but Livingston County's poverty rate stands at 11.4%. And we know that climate change often disproportionately affects vulnerable communities. How is the CSC, so the Climate Smart Communities program, addressing these inequalities, particularly for low-income and marginalized?
As part of the Climate Act, which was a New York State initiative, the Climate Act was charged by the Climate Justice Working Group the development criteria to identify disadvantaged communities to ensure that frontline, otherwise underserved communities benefit from the state's historic transition to cleaner, greener sources of energy, reduce pollution and clean air, and economic opportunities. That being said, there's only one community in Livingston County that is defined as a disadvantaged community on that map. So obviously that doesn't capture the entire scope of what it means to be underserved or at a socioeconomic disadvantage. As the Regional Planning Council, we obviously work with a very diverse set of municipalities, and I think that the definition for rural communities can be a little bit, it's definitely different. So when you're looking at a community in, say, Livingston County, you want to look, zoom in and look at it, specifically. I worked with the town of Lodi, which is in Seneca County, a lot last year. I helped them with a climate adaptation plan. And part of this conversation was also about transportation. And they have this strange dichotomy, right? Because they're on Seneca Lake, where there's a lot of pretty affluent people who live on the lake, but then there's also people who live in flood zones and, don't own a car and don't make, over $100,000 a year, that type of situation. So because of the skew of, the more affluent people, they're not considered disadvantaged, but then there is this high proportion of people who would be considered disadvantaged. And not that those people can't benefit from other federal and state initiatives, but it's definitely something that we've been trying to hone in on as we've been working on the comprehensive climate action plan. We were using federal government's definition of low income and disadvantaged communities, but all of that information is no longer available on their website, which has been a little bit of a challenge. The way that we were able to look at the data, there was this tool on the EPA website, and it was called the Environmental Justice Mapper. And you could basically zoom in on census tracts and you could see if there's things like proximity to like a thruway or something like that, you're at a higher risk of noise pollution and higher risk of asthma. There was a food desert layer, which shows, don't remember the exact metric, but if you live a certain amount of distance away from a grocery store, goes into, the number of people who own a car. And this is all based off of census information. So maybe that's where I'll have to go to get this information again. Different ways to look at disadvantages in a community without looking at the designated New York State disadvantaged communities, or the previously known low-income and disadvantaged communities as defined by the federal government.
If you are just tuning in now, this is Geneseo Today. I'm your host, Carolyn. I am joined by Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council planner and Climate Smart Communities Coordinator, Rachel Scudder. We've spoken a little bit on grants and the importance of government funding, as well as the vulnerability of certain communities. I'd like to take a turn more towards the environmental sustainability. So the Finger Lakes region has been facing significant environmental challenges, such as harmful algae blooms in the lakes. How is the CSC programming addressing these issues in the region?
In addition to climate mitigation, which focuses on reducing greenhouse gases, the Climate Smart Communities program also focuses on adaptation, which is how do we build a resistance to these changes that are, inevitably happening. And I just, off the top of my head, thought about a couple of different actions specifically that are in the Climate Smart Communities program that might address this. There are well over 100 in the whole program, which shows, that it's a complicated problem. It involves a lot of different intersections of different programs and activities and things like that. There is a topic area that it's number 6 in the application, and it's implementing climate smart land use. Part of this could include green infrastructure policies, environmental protection, things of that nature. And then there's also the topic level 7, which is enhanced community resilience to climate change. And this is where climate adaptation planning comes into play. Climate adaptation and resiliency plans that I've worked on. This is something where you can address climate hazards, basically list all the climate hazards, and then work with municipal leaders, emergency management, members of the public who have been affected by different things, and you come up with solutions to that. There is also a new project the state is working on, developing a statewide training curriculum for local governments and community leaders that will prepare them to engage productively in climate change adaptation and resiliency planning. And this is something that will be funded by the New York State Office of Climate Change and coordinated with New York Sea Grant.
So how can local residents and community leaders get involved in the Climate Smart Communities program?
Getting involved in the Climate Smart Communities program, you can contact me if you're in one of the 9 counties in the Genesee Finger Lakes region. My email is rscudder, R-S-C-U-D as in dog, D as in dog, E-R, at gflrpc.org, or you can go to the Climate Smart Communities website, find information that way. Any community that I've worked with, I always feel like they're already a climate smart community and they just have to prove it. I do like to work with communities on what their end goal is, and sometimes that goal is not to become a climate smart community, but to just be actively engaged in different climate smart actions. Like I'm working with a community right now who they're working on an application, but they're mostly excited about they're engaging with their school board and their local school systems, and they're going to build a community garden, and they're going to do like a farmer's market type thing, and they're just happy to starting to engage with this younger generation. And they've done a lot, in their community, but they're happy to just create this connection.
Are there any climate smart initiatives that individuals can do?
Yeah, definitely. You can look at the actions on the Climate Smart Communities website. The Climate Solutions Accelerator of the Genesee Finger Lakes region is a nonprofit that's engaged in this work, and they have a toolkit, and they also have their own climate action plan that targets individual action as well. One thing that I think is helpful and that I've seen in the community groups that I've worked with and the people who've been working with this for a long time is they choose one topic area that they're really passionate about, and then they dedicate their time to that, because climate action is such a diverse and big thing. It just seems really hard to take on, but I think that's where we have to ground ourselves in our community and ground ourselves in our skill sets and the tools that we have, and really figure out where we can make a difference. The local champions, one person really can make a huge difference in a community. I work with a lot of really small communities, and there are groups who do really well, but sometimes it's just one person who's really passionate about something and they know a lot about it, or even if they don't know a lot about it but they know it's important, they'll just dedicate themselves to it. I have worked with so many different groups, and I'm always inspired by all of them because they are all so different, and some of them can be a little bit challenging, but they all just want to do good for their community, and they all have the same end goal, which is to make where they live a better place.
How can we ensure that the momentum created by programs like Climate Smart Communities continues to grow?
There's not really one answer for that. I would say that it's good for communities to get projects implemented. That's a really good momentum. I would also say, talking to your local leaders and representatives and making sure that these issues are on their docket is a good way to keep the momentum going. We find that some communities, not that they've done all that they can, but they have a roadblock that feels so hard to overcome that it's disheartening for them. And the solution is oftentimes just they need funding. And how we get funding, a lot of it is through state government. And there are some, local funding mechanisms, but a lot of it comes down from the state level. Especially in the next 4 years, we'll probably see a lot more pressure from the state to do this. I think it's not being disheartened. There's a lot of different networks, not giving up, and also just taking breaks when you need them. A lot of times communities get their certification, and it's just it can be an arduous process. And so I don't hear from them for a couple months, and then they come back and they're like, all right, we're ready to do something else. So
is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you would like to address or share?
It's a really important topic. It's a really tough topic. I think that the Climate Smart Communities program is great, that the Regional Climate Action Plan we're trying to make it something that is implementable, and we'll build a tool where we can, have a bunch of groups and projects ready, when the funding comes available. I did want to plug our engagement website for the Climate Action Plan. It's engage.gflrpc.org/climate-CPRG. So we just closed out a survey, so there's not anything there right now, but you can sign up for updates, and anytime the next time that we have an engagement survey or something like that, or we're going to be tabling somewhere, we'll be posting on that website, sending out updates. I really enjoy my job, and I'm not sure if a lot of people feel that way, but it's challenging and important, and I love working with Livingston County if they're listening. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
No, thank you for joining us. I learned a lot. I had a really great time.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you for listening to Geneseo Today. Today, I was joined by Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council planner and Climate Smart Communities Coordinator, Rachel Scudder. Tune in next time for more things Geneseo on WGSU 89.3, Geneseo's Voice of the Valley.
Thanks for listening to Geneseo Today, news and insight on issues in and around Geneseo. To learn more about this show or to suggest guests or topics, contact WGSU at geneseo.edu.